What if humanity's oldest ancestors didn't just walk the earth, but radiated wisdom, healed with energy, and lived in harmony with the universe? For centuries, the legend of Lemuria has sparked imagination and debate. But among the many mysteries of this lost civilization, one question remains. Were the Lemurians black, white, or something beyond race entirely? In this video, we dive into the myths, science, spiritual teachings, and ancient clues to uncover the truth about Lemuria's people. Get ready to challenge what you think you know about race, history, and human origins. Introduction to Lemuria and the mystery of its people. Lemuria is a legendary lost continent that has fascinated historians, spiritual seekers, and mythologists for centuries. Believed to have existed millions of years ago, this civilization is often described as possessing advanced spiritual knowledge and a deep connection to the cosmos. Despite numerous theories, much about Lemuria remains a mystery, especially when it comes to the physical characteristics of its people. Were the Lemurians white, black, or perhaps a mix of many races? This question sparks debate across historical, spiritual, and scientific communities. Theories about Lemurian origins vary widely. Some argue the continent was located in the Indian Ocean or the Pacific, regions historically inhabited by darker-skinned peoples. Others propose that Lemurians were an advanced race with pale, almost glowing skin, symbolizing their spiritual enlightenment. The ambiguity surrounding their appearance is partly due to the mythological nature of Lemuria itself, blurring lines between history and spirituality. Many ancient texts do not describe Lemurians with exact racial features, but focus instead on their heightened consciousness and abilities. These beings were said to embody unity, peace, and harmony with nature, qualities transcending physical appearance. Yet, when interpreting ancient illustrations or modern depictions, the question of skin color inevitably arises, often influenced by cultural biases and symbolism. As we dive deeper into the origins of Lemurian people, it's crucial to remember that their legacy is more about spiritual evolution than physical traits. Nonetheless, understanding how their appearance is portrayed in myths and teachings can shed light on how different cultures interpret ancient wisdom. Let's explore various perspectives and evidence to uncover the mystery of Lemurian skin color. Geographic and anthropological context of Lemuria. Geographically, Lemuria is theorized to have been a vast landmass connecting parts of Asia, Madagascar, and possibly Antarctica. This location suggests a natural overlap with populations historically possessing darker skin tones, adapted to tropical climates. Anthropology shows that human skin color evolved in relation to sun exposure, with populations near the equator generally having darker skin for protection. If Lemuria existed in these warm regions, its inhabitants were likely dark-skinned by natural adaptation. This aligns with the fact that the earliest humans originated in Africa, and skin pigmentation was essential for survival. However, since Lemuria is not universally accepted as a physical continent, but also a spiritual realm, these scientific interpretations only provide part of the picture. Some modern spiritual teachers suggest that Lemuria was home to multiple human races, ranging from dark-skinned to lighter-complexioned peoples. This diversity may have reflected the continent's unique position as a crossroads of ancient migration routes. Moreover, cataclysmic events like floods and volcanic eruptions are said to have dispersed Lemurian survivors, influencing the genetic makeup of many modern populations. Understanding this geographical and anthropological context helps reconcile differing views about Lemurian skin color. Instead of a single race, Lemuria might have been a melting pot of ancient humans, united by shared spiritual ideals rather than appearance. This perspective encourages us to view Lemurian identity through the lens of culture and consciousness. Appearance of the Lemurian people, exploring ancient descriptions and symbolism. One of the most debated aspects about Lemurians is their physical appearance. Were they dark-skinned, light-skinned, or something beyond our current understanding of human races? Since Lemuria is a blend of myth, spirituality, and speculative history, descriptions of Lemurian people vary widely across different sources. each influenced by cultural, historical, and symbolic contexts. Ancient spiritual and esoteric writings often describe Lemurians as radiant, almost ethereal beings. Some accounts portray them with a luminous complexion, glowing skin, and an almost otherworldly beauty. This imagery is frequently symbolic rather than literal, representing their elevated spiritual state, purity, and connection to divine energy. The idea of white skin here is often tied to symbolism of light, enlightenment, and spiritual awakening, rather than biological race as we understand it today. Conversely, some spiritual texts and modern theorists propose that the original Lemurians were more closely connected to indigenous and ancient human populations in tropical or equatorial regions, which would suggest darker skin tones. Considering that Lemuria is theorized to have been located in the Pacific or Indian Oceans near Asia and Africa, it is plausible that the original inhabitants had physical traits typical of those geographical regions, meaning darker skin adapted to high UV exposure and tropical climates. In addition, some writers argue that Lemurians were a highly diverse people, with many different skin tones and physical features, reflecting the melting pot of cultures and species that existed on this ancient continent. This diversity could have been lost over millennia due to natural disasters, migrations, and the evolution of humanity. Looking deeper into symbolism, many ancient cultures associated skin color with spiritual qualities or cosmic attributes. For example, in Hindu mythology, light skin is often linked to purity and divine beings, while dark skin can be associated with strength, fertility, or mystery. Similarly, in some Native American and African traditions, darker skin is revered as sacred and tied to the earth's creative power. These symbolic interpretations might influence how Lemurians are portrayed in various spiritual teachings, transcending modern racial categorizations. Moreover, some esoteric schools suggest that Lemurians were not purely physical beings but existed, partially as multidimensional or energetic entities. This concept implies that their appearance might have been fluid or different from modern human forms altogether, making the question of race less relevant from their perspective. Modern attempts to identify the physical appearance of Lemurians often fall into two categories: scientific reconstruction based on probable ancient populations, and spiritual interpretation based on metaphysical characteristics. Both perspectives enrich our understanding, but remind us that Lemuria, at its core, is a symbol of lost knowledge and spiritual awakening, rather than a strictly historical or racial narrative. Finally, it's important to consider the social and cultural implications of the question. Discussions about the skin color of ancient civilizations like Lemuria often intersect with contemporary issues of race, identity, and cultural heritage. Understanding Lemuria as a spiritual archetype can help us move beyond simplistic racial labels toward a more inclusive appreciation of humanity's shared origins and potential. Lemurian spirituality and its influence on human identity. The spiritual teachings attributed to the Lemurians focus less on physical form and more on the awakening of consciousness, unity, and harmony with nature. This suggests that the true legacy of Lemuria is the wisdom of the soul rather than the color of the skin. Many spiritual traditions today, including New Age beliefs, draw heavily on the idea that Lemurians were enlightened beings who transcended the limitations of physical appearance. Lemurian teachings emphasize the interconnectedness of all life: humans, animals, plants, and the earth itself. This holistic worldview challenges the modern fixation on physical differences, advocating for a universal identity grounded in spirit and energy. Thus, the question of whether Lemurians were black or white is secondary to their message of unity and peace. Historically, many indigenous cultures, such as Native Americans and Aboriginal Australians, claim descent from or connection to Lemurian ancestors. These cultures typically have darker skin tones and rich spiritual traditions centered on harmony with the earth, suggesting that Lemurian wisdom is not limited to any one race. Furthermore, some theorists propose that Lemurian consciousness still exists within humanity as a spiritual heritage rather than a genetic one. This means that people of all races today may carry the spiritual DNA of Lemuria through shared values of compassion, healing, and enlightenment. By focusing on spiritual identity over physical appearance, the mystery of Lemurian skin color becomes less divisive and more inspiring. It invites us to recognize our shared human essence beyond race, promoting a global spiritual awakening that honors all people as reflections of divine light. Cultural interpretations and racial perspectives on Lemuria. Throughout history, the portrayal of Lemurians has been influenced by the cultural lens of the storytellers and scholars. European occultists of the 19th and early 20th centuries often depicted Lemurians as white or blonde-haired beings, reflecting Eurocentric ideals of beauty and spirituality prevalent in their societies. These portrayals were less about historical accuracy and more about fitting ancient myths into contemporary racial narratives. On the other hand, indigenous perspectives and modern spiritual movements tend to emphasize Lemuria's connection to darker-skinned, earth-connected peoples. This view highlights the reverence for nature and energy healing found in many indigenous traditions, which resonate strongly with Lemurian philosophy. The clash between these portrayals mirrors broader societal debates about race and spirituality. It exposes how ancient myths can be co-opted to serve differing ideological agendas. Recognizing this helps us approach the Lemurian mystery with a critical eye, appreciating the diversity of interpretations while seeking a deeper truth beyond surface appearances. Moreover, contemporary scholars encourage viewing Lemuria as a metaphor for humanity's lost unity rather than a literal race. This interpretation aligns with spiritual teachings, emphasizing that the divisions of race are human constructs that distract from our fundamental oneness. By acknowledging the varied cultural influences on Lemurian imagery, we open the door to a more inclusive understanding of our spiritual heritage, one that embraces all skin tones as sacred and equally capable of enlightenment. Scientific evidence and mythological narratives. From a scientific perspective, the existence of Lemuria remains hypothetical. The concept originated in the 19th century as a way to explain geological and biological puzzles, such as the distribution of certain species. While the continent itself has not been confirmed by modern geology, the idea of a lost civilization persists strongly in spiritual and mythological narratives. When considering the people of Lemuria scientifically, it is important to look at the genetic and fossil records of ancient humans in regions near the proposed location of Lemuria. These records indicate a variety of human ancestors with diverse physical traits, many with darker skin suited to tropical climates. Mythologically, Lemuria is often depicted as a civilization of spiritual adepts with abilities like telepathy, energy healing, and deep connection to nature. These stories focus less on physical features and more on their mystical qualities, reinforcing the idea that their appearance was symbolic rather than literal. The blending of science and myth creates a rich tapestry of possibilities for who the Lemurians might have been. While scientific data suggests a population of darker-skinned humans, the spiritual narrative invites us to see beyond physical traits to the essence of Lemurian wisdom. Modern spiritual movements and Lemurian legacy. Modern New Age and spiritual communities often reference Lemuria as a source of ancient wisdom and healing knowledge. These groups describe Lemurians as enlightened beings who practiced energy work, meditation, and lived in harmony with nature, regardless of their skin color. Many claim to receive Lemurian teachings through meditation, channeling, or psychic experiences, emphasizing themes of unity, healing, and spiritual awakening. The focus on energy and consciousness transcends racial identity, inviting all seekers to connect with the Lemurian legacy. Some New Age beliefs also propose that Lemurians had crystal technology and psychic abilities, further distancing their image from purely physical characteristics. This spiritual portrayal encourages a universal view of Lemuria, where the physical body is secondary to the development of the soul. By embracing Lemuria as a spiritual archetype, modern practitioners honor the past while creating inclusive communities that celebrate diversity and collective growth. Conclusion: moving beyond color to universal truths. The question of whether the Lemurian people were black or white touches on many layers of human understanding, involving history, culture, spirituality, and science. The debate is not just about skin color, but about how we interpret ancient knowledge and what it means for us today. Geography and anthropology suggest that the original inhabitants of the regions, thought to be Lemuria, likely had darker skin tones, adapted to tropical climates, and strong sunlight. This fits with what we know about early human evolution and migration patterns. However, many spiritual texts and modern teachings describe Lemurians in symbolic terms, often highlighting light, radiance, and purity. These descriptions should be understood as metaphors for enlightenment and spiritual awakening, rather than literal skin color. Lemuria itself is more than just a lost physical continent or a race of people. It is a powerful symbol representing the potential for spiritual evolution, unity, and harmony with the natural world. The teachings attributed to Lemuria focus on transcending physical limitations, including racial and cultural divisions. They remind us that the true essence of humanity lies beyond skin color, in our collective consciousness and spiritual connection to the universe. Throughout history, interpretations of Lemuria's people have been influenced by cultural biases and the perspectives of those telling the story. European occultists often depicted Lemurians as fair-skinned and blonde-haired, mirroring their own ideals, while indigenous and contemporary spiritual groups emphasized the connection to Earth-based, darker-skinned populations. This divergence shows how ancient myths can be refracted through the lens of contemporary social and racial dynamics. In moving beyond the question of skin color, the real lesson of Lemuria is about unity, the understanding that all humans share a common spiritual heritage. The divisions we see today based on race, nationality, or culture are transient and surface level. Lemurian philosophy encourages us to awaken to our shared humanity and embrace compassion, love, and respect for all beings. Modern spiritual movements have taken this message to heart. They emphasize that Lemurian wisdom is not confined to one group of people but belongs to all who seek enlightenment and healing. The focus on energy healing, mindfulness, and living in harmony with nature reflects the continuation of Lemurian principles in contemporary life. This inclusivity is essential as the world becomes increasingly interconnected and multicultural. By viewing Lemuria as a spiritual archetype rather than a historical race, we can transcend divisive ideas and celebrate the diversity of human experience. This perspective honors the contributions of all peoples and recognizes the importance of spiritual growth as a unifying force. In essence, the legacy of Lemuria calls us to move beyond physical appearances and social labels toward a deeper understanding of ourselves and our place in the cosmos. It teaches that true enlightenment is achieved through love, unity, and inner peace, principles that remain relevant regardless of our external differences. Therefore, the question of whether Lemurians were black or white becomes less important than what they represent. A timeless aspiration for humanity to awaken, heal, and live in harmony with one another and the planet. This universal truth invites us to embrace a vision of a world where diversity is celebrated and spiritual unity is the foundation for lasting peace. As we conclude this exploration, remember that Lemuria is not just an ancient mystery, but a living inspiration. Its wisdom encourages us to look within, recognize our shared light, and contribute to the collective awakening of human consciousness, a journey that transcends color, race, and history.